Welcome back to the report. Governments worldwide are introducing various measures to combat the perceived threat posed by the Islamic State. The Australian government is going further than some in introducing a number of measures that have been seen as draconian. Afzal Ahmed has more on this story.
The mood is tense in Australia, the conversation is charged and people are afraid. Around 800 security personnel conducted huge anti-terror operations in Muslim neighbourhoods over the last week, putting the community on knife edge. In an address today, Prime Minister Tony Abbott said that he's seeking broad new security powers to combat what he says is a rising threat from militant Islamists.
My unambiguous message to all Australians who fight with terrorist groups is that you will be arrested, prosecuted and jailed for a very long time indeed, and that our laws are being changed to make it easier to keep potential terrorists off the streets. The only safe place for those who have been brutalised and militarised by fighting with terrorists is inside a maximum security prison.
Under the proposed legislation, it would be a crime for an Australian citizen to travel to any area overseas without a valid reason, once the government has declared it off limits. Legislation requiring telecommunication providers to keep metadata and to make it available will also be introduced. The Muslim community, who number nearly 500,000, have hit out at the measures and the brutality of the raids. One young child who did not want to be seen due to being a minor spoke about how his mother was treated by the police.
A man, Officer Pig, tried to take off the blanket off my mother, and she was dressed exactly like how a woman dresses for her husband. What would you do if this was your mother? What would you do? If it's not for a mother, at least for a Muslim sister.
Other speakers hit out at the hysteria created by the government and the intentional scapegoating of Muslims.
The timing is suspect, to put it very, very mildly. These raids come 1 week before the anti-terror laws are going to be tabled in Parliament and debated. In theory, they're going to be debated, but we'll probably see no debate. These laws come as yet another US-led invasion of Iraq is imminent. So we know what this is about. This is about creating the fear, creating the hysteria in order to justify what is unjust and unjustified policy.
Officials say the raids were conducted after intelligence hinted Islamic State supporters would take random people off the streets and conduct beheadings. Evidence of this is yet to emerge. Afzal Ahmed, The Report, Islam Channel.
Well, with me in the studio to provide some commentary is Carl Bridge, Professor of Australian History at King's College London. Carl, welcome to the programme. Is this the proverbial sledgehammer to crack what seems to be 100 people out of a population of 23 million and therefore maybe a small nut?
It is quite extraordinary that you've got roughly 100 people that seem to be in the frame, and fewer than that really in the frame, with a Muslim population of Australia of 500,000. As your commentary says, the Australian government has just committed troops to the UAE with a view to aiding in whatever's going to happen in Syria and Iraq. So there's a definite link up there, it seems to me.
Do you think, famously at the beginning of the Afghan and Iraq wars, the security services in this country warned Tony Blair that one consequence would be blowback, would be more likely to produce terrorism in this country? Do you think Abbott's treading the same path?
Well, I think he is. He's in a difficult position. We don't know what his intelligence is telling him, what sorts of intercepts they've got and how serious these threats are. If he doesn't react, he'll be blamed for not reacting. And if he does react, then he'll be blamed for blowing onto the flame. So he's between the devil and deep blue sea. But it does seem to be an overreaction. He might have done what he did without the media attention and without all of the
Abbott's a famously controversial head of state, Prime Minister. Do you think that a less controversial figure would have handled this differently?
Quite likely. I mean, Abbott always does go in boots and all and takes what he sees as the high moral ground and all the rest. He seems to have done that again.
Do you think it'll work for him politically?
Well, it'll work in some senses. It'll probably confirm his core vote. But if the elections are close, then 500,000 Muslims, or say, I don't know what proportion of those vote, but a fair chunk, would be a constituency that you would need to pay attention to.
I mean, are these as exceptional? I mean, we were suggesting they are exceptional, the ban on travel to the designated countries and so forth and so on. Nobody else seems to have quite gone that far.
Not the travel ban, no. No,
and there's some pretty harsh regulations and new laws out there but not that.
I mean, the other argument that's coming up is that they'll take passports away. But half of these people are born in Australia. You can't take their passports away. So it's I don't know what the remedy for this sort of thing is, but you're not going to catch everybody by doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible kind of blanket ban. I mean, the passport thing most people would regard as a pretty draconian measure, but at least that would be aimed at people who at least have been suspected, possibly they might even need to be convicted, which is, you know, a diminishingly interesting thing to the authorities these days, but it might be that. This is what, the whole population can't go to X? I mean,
well, we don't know where they're going to stop them going to yet. So I suppose if it was an actual war zone and they were saying you can't go there, then fair enough. But if it's you can't go to a whole country and your your relations are there, then that's a dreadful thing to do to anybody.
Yes, and given what we know about how the global terrorist networks work, you know, all right, you might say you can't go to Syria, but you can't also go to Pakistan.
Well, exactly, or Turkey. You know, they might be going to Turkey on a holiday. It's like sanctions. It's a very difficult thing to impose. It sounds good, but trying to actually make it work is going to hit a lot of innocent parties.
And what's the political opposition like in Australia to this?
Well, the Labor Party will be trying, in opposition, will be trying to say that perhaps he should have thought more about it and targeted these things more, I suspect, and that the police actions were probably a bit over the top. But if they were in power, they'd probably have to do something as well. If this is what the security services are telling them, they have to do something.
And do you think it'll be the kind of opposition where, you know, basically the governing elite doesn't open up party divisions on the question of security matters? So they sort of mumble about, oh, we would have done it differently, but vote for it in the end. Is that the kind of opposition, or might they actually be a bit more civil libertarian?
Most of the Muslims in Australia live in Labor electorates. So Labor, I think, will be more sensitive to this than Abbott. I don't think he's losing his core vote from doing this, but I think the Labor Party would be losing some of this.
And what about the press? Is that supportive, as it generally is in this country, or are there critical voices from the...
There are critical voices in the press, but it's a bit like this country. You get a range of opinions. The most gung-ho are the Murdoch press, as they are here.
And in America and everywhere else. And you've mentioned it, we mentioned it in the introduction. To what degree do you think this is linked to the deployment of Australian troops in Iraq?
Well, it's happened within a week. So it looks as though the two things are connected. They're investigating the two things at the same time. You could say they found this and therefore decided to deploy the troops and therefore investigate it, so it could be part of a whole. But it seems it's definitely linked.
Okay, well, thanks very much for your views on all that. No, it's